I was wondering when you'd finally ask for a divorce. Honestly, poor people without parents are no good at all.
With a mocking smile and a sharp voice, Susan spoke down to me. From the moment I married my husband, James, his mother, Susan, had been tormenting me. She would barge into the house James and I lived in, wait for me to come home from work, and then endlessly criticize everything I did around the house. She criticized my cleaning, laundry folding, cooking, and everything else, but she never offered to help. After enduring this for so long, one day I finally reached my breaking point.
You must not have been taught properly since you were raised by a single father. Your taste buds are messed up, so your food is terrible.
Susan had said this after tasting my food without permission. I had been raised by my grandfather after losing my parents at my young age. Knowing this, I couldn't forgive her for mocking him. Out of anger, I asked for our divorce, and Susan and James agreed without hesitation. James joined in, writing on Susan's almost gleeful response.
Exactly. The difference in our family backgrounds was too much. Next time, find someone with a background as good as ours.
But they don't know. They can laugh now, but it won't last. In the not too distant future, they would learn the truth and collapse to their knees. My name is Rachel, and I'm a 33-year-old part-time homemaker. 2 years ago, I married my senior colleague, James. He had been teaching me various things as my mentor since I joined the company.
If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me anytime.
His gentle smile completely captured my heart. Having little experience in romance, I couldn't be very proactive. I could only muster up the courage to ask work-related questions, and just thinking about asking personal questions or inviting him out for a meal after work made my face flush with embarrassment. However, despite my hesitation, James was the one who asked me out.
I was drawn to your serious attitude and dedication to your work. If you don't mind, would you go out with me?
I immediately nodded at his words. After dating for several years, we got married and started living together. In my heart, alongside the joy of being able to stay with the person I love forever, there was a sense of relief that I could finally put my grandfather's mind at ease. Actually, I lost my parents when I was very young, and my grandfather, Brian, took me in and raised me.
Why don't I have my parents?
During my rebellious phase, I knew it wasn't fair to lash out at my grandfather, but there were times I screamed at him anyway. Now that I'm an adult, I don't do that anymore, and we've built a good relationship. But I can never forget the sad look on his face from those times. Feeling guilty for the hardships I've caused him, I decided to do my best to repay his kindness. I bought him gifts with my first paycheck, took him on trips for his birthday, and treated him to nice restaurants. By marrying James and starting a family, I felt I could finally provide him with true peace of mind.
Rachel, be happy.
At our wedding, seeing my grandfather say this through tears made me cry as well. When we first got married, both James and I were busy with our work, but things have finally calmed down recently, and we've started thinking about having our kids. Of course, I also wanted children, but James's mom, Susan, was a significant factor in pushing us to think about it more seriously.
Rachel, it's been 2 years since you got married, right? No kids yet? Don't you want to give me a grandchild soon?
I can't count how many times she has said that to me. Well, maybe someday. I'd respond with a vague smile and steer the conversation to another topic, but the pressure every time we met was quite stressful. Even when I sent pleading looks to James, whether he didn't notice or chose to ignore them, he never said anything. Trying to endure the pressure to have a grandchild, I started visiting their house less frequently, but it was futile. Susan began coming over to our house uninvited. "Susan, what are you doing here?" The first time I saw her, I was so shocked that I couldn't help but yell. But Susan was completely unfazed.
James gave me a spare key. We're family, so there's no problem with me coming in, right?
Initially, she only came on weekends, but now she comes over on weekdays too, waiting for us to come home from work. Susan started coming to our house about 3 or 4 times a week. I became so used to it, or rather, so exasperated by her persistence, that I lost the will to confront her about it. If you think Susan would do some chores before James or I got home, you'd be wrong. Instead, she drops her things and says to me as I head into the kitchen,
Hurry up and make dinner. I'm tired of waiting, and I'm starving.
"All right." I would obediently respond, but inside I was sighing deeply. I tried arguing back, but that would only result in a long lecture. Not that it mattered much, as Susan would still give me advice, or rather lectures, on housework even if I didn't argue. When I came home late due to overtime and tried to reheat some leftovers, she would make snide remarks.
Leftovers? Are you cutting corners? Freshly cooked meals taste better. You're not feeding James this half-hearted cooking, are you?
She would only criticize without offering any help, leaving me utterly exasperated with her. If I showed the slightest hint of dissatisfaction, she would lash out at me.
What? Do you have a problem with what I'm saying? I'm giving you advice as someone with more life experience.
Over time, I developed the ability to let her nagging go in one ear and out the other. But there was one thing I couldn't stand. While waiting for us to come home, she would freely use our water and electricity without a second thought. Once, she even left the TV on while taking her nap. As a result, or rather because of this, our utility bills kept increasing. "Hey, can you talk to Susan and ask her to return the spare key?" I was exhausted from dealing with Susan, so I had asked James several times, but he never really listened to me.
Come on, don't say that.
James would respond with a carefree smile, trying to calm me down. He seemed to believe that Susan's actions were just her way of trying to get along with me.
Don't be so uptight. Mom wants to get along with you.
James wasn't a mama's boy. He genuinely meant well, which made it hard for me to push back. However, Susan's comments kept escalating.
Rachel, you're really not very efficient. Maybe it's because you were raised by a single parent.
She started making derogatory remarks about my grandfather, who raised me, and I had reached my breaking point. It seemed Susan thought it was better to be raised by 2 parents than by one. One day, I received a shocking call.
Today, Susan showed up at the office without an appointment.
The call came from Stephanie, my grandfather's secretary. Even though I couldn't see her face over the phone, her tone made it clear that she was very displeased. What? For what reason? I was worried that she had gone to my grandfather to say the same nasty things she always said to me.
I bet Rachel is really inefficient. You were her guardian, right? What kind of upbringing did you give her?
I could imagine Susan spouting these words with a sneer on her face. But it turned out I was wrong.
Apparently, Brian told her, "Feel free to visit anytime you're in the area," so she took him up on it. She ate a ton of sweets and then left.
It seemed Susan had taken my grandfather's polite invitation at face value.
I got some delicious treats from Brian's company. He told me, Feel free to visit anytime you're in the area. How kind of him.
As usual, Susan was waiting for us at our house, and as soon as I opened the front door, she happily reported this to me. Maybe my grandfather did say that, but Susan couldn't read between the lines. Even if you plan to visit, it's common courtesy to call ahead. All I could do was let out a dry laugh in disbelief. Susan's expression changed, and she furrowed her brows, clearly displeased with my reaction. Then, as usual, she began making snide remarks towards me.
By the way, when are you going to start coming home a bit earlier? If you were more competent, you should be able to finish your work and come home sooner, right?
My lips twitched involuntarily. I was used to her insults, but that didn't mean they didn't hurt. I tried not to take them too seriously, but I still hadn't reached the point where I could just smile and let them roll off me.
If you don't come home early, James will have to keep eating those tasteless leftovers. Honestly, you have no sense of supporting him.
I'm sorry, work has been really busy lately. If that's the case, why doesn't Susan cook instead? As I muttered this under my breath, Susan's eyes flashed with anger.
Don't make excuses. This is what happens when you're poor and have no time. It's because you were raised by a single parent and lacked money.
I couldn't hide my confusion at her words. I opened my mouth to respond, but all that came out were meaningless words like, well, and so.
You take after that your guardian, Brian. Sure, he was kind, but his company was old and small. It probably never did well. His clothes were always shabby. Couldn't he even afford new ones?
I couldn't stand her insulting not only me, but also my grandfather. Stop speaking ill of my grandfather. What do you even know about him? I raised my voice. This seemed to anger Susan, who then wore an openly furious expression.
Oh my, talking back to your mother-in-law? How rude. Apologize immediately. Say, I'm sorry for being so disrespectful.
I stood my ground, glaring back at Susan. Insulting my beloved grandfather and then demanding an apology from me was absolutely wrong. It wasn't me who lacked common sense. It was Susan.
What are you looking at? You're really infuriating.
Susan shouted at me. Though she was shorter than me, her presence felt overwhelmingly large.
You're upset and talking back because I told you the truth, aren't you? It hit a nerve, right? You're probably embarrassed that Brian still has to work so hard at his age.
That's not true. I'm proud of my grandfather. However, even if I said that, Susan would just scoff and never apologize for what she said about him.
Oh, maybe it's not Brian you're ashamed of, but yourself. It's embarrassing to be so poor that he still has to work at his age, isn't it?
Susan's baseless assumptions left me too drained to argue anymore. That's enough. I sighed loudly enough for her to hear and retreated to my room. After that day, Susan's attacks on me intensified. Along with that, she started spending even more time at our house.
Hey, you're doing it wrong. Redo it right now.
If she didn't like the way I did housework, she'd immediately start yelling. From snide remarks about dust in the corners and sloppy folding of laundry to unreasonable demands like rearrange the furniture because I don't like it, she constantly criticized me. If I tried to say anything, she'd cut me off with a loud lecture. Over time, I realized that if I kept my mouth shut, her lectures would end in about 15 minutes. It wasn't a comforting realization. So, whenever I heard Susan start yelling, I would clench my teeth and stay silent, enduring her tirades. The lectures always happened when James wasn't around. Susan came over uninvited again and lectured me. What should I do? I had told him, but he would always side with her and never support me. I understood that if I just endured it, everything would be fine, but I couldn't accept it, and I started crying secretly in the bathroom late at night. Finally, my stress reached its limit, and I couldn't take it anymore. It was yet another dinner with Susan and James, probably the 100th time or more. Of course, I hadn't invited Susan. She just showed up uninvited as usual. While I was setting the table with the food I had prepared, Susan began picking at the dishes before everyone was seated. I furrowed my brows, but quickly shook my head to dismiss it, knowing that if Susan noticed my change in expression, it would lead to another tedious lecture.
What is this food? It's awful. Recook it. You must not have been taught properly since you were raised by a single father. Your taste buds are messed up, so the food is terrible.
Susan, who had been picking at the food, spewed insults accompanied by a coarse, loud laugh. The moment I heard her, something snapped inside me. I experienced firsthand what it meant to reach the breaking point. Yes, my grandfather raised me. So what? Gender has nothing to do with it. My grandfather raised me with love and care. Stop insulting my family. Even after shouting, my anger didn't subside, and I was left breathing heavily as if I had just finished a workout. Susan and James looked shocked for a moment, but then their expressions changed to mocking smiles. Seeing this, I realized with dismay that my feelings hadn't reached them at all. Please divorce me. I can't stay with people who endlessly belittle others like you two.
Oh, I get it.
When I asked for our divorce, he agreed surprisingly quickly. In fact, they looked almost satisfied, as if they'd been waiting for me to say it.
I was wondering when you'd finally ask for a divorce. Honestly, poor people without parents are no good at all. I'm glad you said it first because I was worried your bad luck would rub off on us.
Exactly. The difference in our family backgrounds was too much. Next time, find someone with a background as good as ours.
Susan was her usual self, but James seemed like a completely different person from before we got married. The kind mentor who helped me with my questions was gone. No, this was his true nature all along.
Well, now that it's settled, pack your things and get out of here, you jinx.
While being insulted, I packed my things and called my grandfather to come pick me up. I bit my lower lip hard, determined not to respond to any more insults. Nothing I said would get through to these heartless people. When my grandfather called to say he had arrived, I opened the front door without a word. There he was, standing with a worried expression, looking at me. Susan, noticing this, smirked and made a snide remark.
Oh my, Brian, how kind of you to come pick her up. You probably have to get up early for work again tomorrow, right? Poor people never get a break.
Hearing this, Stephanie, my grandfather's secretary who had come with him, clenched her fists in anger. Without warning, she pulled a prepared divorce agreement from her bag and handed it to James.
How thoughtful of you to have this ready. So kind.
Yes, it saves us the trouble.
Laughing with Susan, James immediately signed the divorce papers. Their expressions were completely different from those of mine, my grandfather, and Stephanie. We maintained an emotionless, stoic look, as if all feelings had been wiped away. I'll submit the divorce papers for you.
All right, thank you.
Now, hurry up and leave. Thank goodness your poor blood won't taint our family.
It seemed she couldn't resist getting in one last dig. Even though I glared at her with all my might, Susan remained unaffected.
I'll go ahead with Brian to bring the car around.
With that, my grandfather and Stephanie left. For some reason, James and Susan followed us to the entrance of the apartment building.
What, did you think we'd let you leave without a proper farewell? It's the least we could do.
Susan's words were transparently insincere, revealing her true intent to mock my grandfather and me. I chose to stay silent, knowing it was futile to argue, but seeing my grandfather mock was unbearable. I turned to confront the two of them, but Stephanie stopped me. She was smiling broadly for some reason.
I'll go get the car, so you keep your temper under control.
With that advice, she headed toward the parking lot. Misunderstanding her departure as a retreat, Susan and James continued to laugh heartily. Then a luxury car pulled up and my grandfather stepped out. Seeing this, their eyes widened and they were drawn toward it.
Wow, this car must be incredibly expensive.
No way someone as poor as him bought this. He must have rented it to show off.
They just couldn't resist mocking us. As I got into the car, my grandfather and I exchanged knowing smiles. Stephanie, observing this, crossed her arms and muttered cryptically.
This is just the beginning.
The next day, while visiting my grandfather's company for some errands, I noticed commotion near the lobby. Though I was some distance away, the sounds echoed clearly through the lobby.
Get Brian out here now.
We know he's in there.
Hearing those shouts, I put a hand to my forehead. Peeking from behind a pillar, I saw Susan and James causing a scene.
Let go of us.
Security guards were holding them back as they flailed their limbs. Other employees kept their distance, watching the spectacle unfold. What are they doing here? Are they so upset about the luxury car from last night that they came to verify if it really belonged to my grandfather? They must have nothing better to do. Feeling exasperated, I approached them and asked, "What are you doing?" My voice, devoid of any warmth or emotion, came out flat and detached. They turned to me and shouted,
Get Brian out here.
We know he's here. Your grandfather.
I let out a laugh at Susan and James's misunderstanding. Irritated by this, their eyebrows twitched in annoyance. My grandfather isn't here. His actual office is in the building next door.
Next door? What? What do you mean?
Actually, the place we were in was used by only a select few. My grandfather's office was in the high-rise building next door, which is quite rare in this area.
Both this building and the one next door are owned by my company.
As he spoke in a low voice, my grandfather appeared in the lobby. His usually calm demeanor was replaced with a terrifying expression, his brows and eyes furrowed in anger. Seeing the terrifying expression my grandfather hadn't shown the previous day, Susan and James were left gaping like fish begging for food. They had been so smug and condescending before. My grandfather strode over to them and glared down. Still tall and imposing, his presence was overwhelming. Susan and James were left gasping for air, unable to speak. I could barely hear their strained breaths.
I never expected to be looked down on just because of the appearance of my company. What kind of mindset do you have?
Well, we weren't really looking down on you.
Susan desperately tried to make excuses. But her weak attempt was so absurd that I almost burst out laughing. If that wasn't a condescending attitude, I'd love to know what kind of attitude or words truly look down on people. The scenes of Susan and James hurling insults at my grandfather and me are etched firmly in our minds.
From the moment you visited the company without an appointment, I felt something was off. For someone with no sense of common courtesy, you have no right to lecture others about it.
As my grandfather confronted Susan, James began to slowly back away, perhaps trying to escape. However, the security guards didn't let him escape and blocked his path, glaring at him. My grandfather sighed once and continued speaking. He explained that he had originally lived a bit farther away, but when my stress reached its limit, he prepared to establish a new company nearby to give Susan and James a taste of their own medicine.
That's impossible.
Susan, finally able to raise her voice, shouted loudly. Though it wasn't cold, her lips had turned pale and were trembling. It was as if she had just gotten out of a freezing pool.
Until a few months ago, you were working in an old, run-down office. There's no way you could set up a new office in such a short time. Don't try to act all high and mighty just because we mocked you.
My grandfather responded calmly.
The rundown office you're talking about was the first workplace started from scratch by Rachel's biological grandfather. I kept it because it had sentimental value.
The word rundown was emphasized excessively. While my grandfather didn't see it that way, it conveyed his frustration and sadness at being mocked by Susan.
What? Biological grandfather? What are you talking about? This makes no sense.
Susan collapsed weakly to the floor, clutching her head in confusion. She muttered incoherently, glancing back and forth between my grandfather and me. Ignoring her gaze, I suggested to my grandfather, "Since they don't seem to believe it, why don't you show them around the building next door?"
Indeed.
My grandfather said with a smile, gesturing toward the entrance of the building.
If you'd like, I can give you a tour.
His once angry expression had softened into the gentle smile I knew so well. Relieved by the change, Susan and James visibly relaxed, their fearful faces turning into grins. However, beads of cold sweat still dotted their foreheads, showing their lingering nervousness.
Oh yes, please.
Susan said, still trying to look down on my grandfather.
The exterior might look nice, but the inside is probably just as run down as this place.
Unaware of my grandfather's disdain for having his cherished company called rundown, James whispered to Susan with a laugh. Whether he realized it or not, his voice wasn't lowered at all, so we could hear every word clearly. Despite their confident demeanor, Susan and James were left speechless as they walked through the doors of the new company. The hallways were filled with many employees, and the interior design was sophisticated. Their mouths hung open in shock, as if their jaws might drop, completely stunned by how different it was from what they had imagined.
What is this? I can't believe he's running such a big company.
You've got to be kidding me. Are you mocking us?
They stood frozen for a moment before scratching their heads and shouting in frustration. Who was it that mocked us first? I said, and they immediately stopped moving, collapsing together. The security guards then dragged them outside. After that, we never heard from them again. Rumor had it that word of James mocking my well-known grandfather had spread, causing him to be ostracized at work. He was even considering quitting his job. James had once talked about finding a new partner from a better family, but now that seemed unlikely. My grandfather expanded the company even further, handed over the presidency to me, and is now enjoying his retirement. I vowed to work even harder, determined not to be outdone by my remarkable grandfather.